Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about writing routines, my specific writing routine or lack thereof, I guess I should maybe say, but also how my writing routine has changed over the years. The way I approach a book now and just my writing process is a lot different than it was when I started writing 23 years ago, which is crazy to me. I started writing when I was pregnant with my first child, which was my daughter, and she will be 23 in a few weeks. So big milestone for me. But I was thinking today as I was trying to get down, sit down and get to the page. And I was thinking about just how much my writing life has changed over the last 2 decades. And the things that used to work for me or the things that I needed to do back then are not the same things necessarily that work for me now. And they're also, just not how I necessarily practice my writing or show up for my writing anymore. So I thought we could kind of chat a little bit about that. If you're new to my channel, my name is Rebecca Taylor. I currently write domestic suspense psychological thrillers. I'm currently working on my latest novel, which is Her Name Was Lola. I am in the final stages of it. We're getting it wrapped up. I just earlier today hit the 92,000 word mark, and I suspect, whereas I had actually originally planned this book to only be 85,000 words, I think it's looking like it's going to be more like maybe 110,000 words, which honestly always kind of happens with my books. I have sort of a rough plan, and then I just get to writing and it turns into what it's going to be. It's my 11th novel, but it's my 5th domestic suspense psychological thriller. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about just my routines, what's different, what's working now, what isn't working anymore, and some things you might want to try. I want to talk first of all about when I was younger, when my kids were younger, and maybe you're in the situation, maybe you are a parent and writing with young children, maybe you have a full-time job. I had both. For a number of years I worked as a school psychologist, and I had 2 young children. They're my daughter and my son are about 18 months apart. So, but I was passionate about trying to get my author career up and going, writing these books that just I just really felt these stories and I wanted to tell them. And it was just, even though I had, not a lot of time and even less energy, it was just something that I felt pretty called to do and compelled to do. So the way I used to work it out, I would generally wake up about 4 o'clock in the morning and tiptoe downstairs because I never wanted to wake my kids. Just always seemed like they were really late sleepers. And so I never wanted to wake them up. And I would get downstairs as quietly as possible, make myself a cup of coffee, and just kind of, sit down and get to work. And there wasn't a lot of thought about it or messing around or whatever because I had just very limited time. And, by the time they were waking up about 6 o'clock, then it was time to get started for the day, right? So I needed to get them ready for school. I had to get myself ready for work. And once that whole process got going and the whole day got started, that was pretty much it. I wasn't really in a space. I had space. My job was very busy and very stressful, and I didn't really have time throughout my day to even think about my book, like never mind writing it. And so that's just kind of how I wrote for years. It's probably how I wrote my first 6 books that way. I was employed pretty much the whole time, and that's how I was writing. So, and of course over time my kids grew up and they had more independence as they got older and didn't need me quite so much. And so then, my writing routine pretty much stayed the same because I had, that daytime job. And so I would get up in the morning and get my writing done. But I did find that there was oftentimes more opportunity throughout the day to kind of sneak in a half hour here or an hour there because my kids would be over at a friend's house playing or outside doing whatever, or we would go to the pool together, and they're both excellent swimmers, so they didn't need me eagle eyeing them the entire time once they were old enough, and I could find those moments to work on my book. And so I guess one of my first things I might sort of say to you is don't knock those stolen kind of half hours or hours here. You know, like when I would take my daughter to soccer practice, you know, a lot of times I would sit in the car and wait for her, and that would be a great opportunity for me to get some writing done. So I just always made it a habit of taking my laptop with me everywhere. And if not my laptop, then like a notebook, because sometimes I would handwrite my or not my whole novel, but I would handwrite parts of my book as well. So I just like encourage you to always think about like there's other opportunities throughout your day to just kind of pull your book out, and you maybe only can get like a paragraph or 2 paragraphs in, but it adds up. Like those little pieces come together and add up to be a whole lot. The other thing that was nice about this is that it always kept me connected to my book. So if you're a writer, and I have certainly done this before too, if you ever kind of go through this stretch of time where you're not in touch with your novel, you're not reading it, you're not, you know, working on it actively, you can kind of lose the thread of what is going on. You can kind of lose the story. And so then what happens, you know, if you go, you know, a month, 2 months, 3 months, you might find that you have to spend a lot of time kind of getting back to your story, reconnecting with the characters, you know, trying to catch that thread of what is actually going on. And the nice thing is that even if you're only able to sort of write in snippets throughout your day, at least you're staying grounded and connected to the story. And so you're never having to go back. And I'm pretty sure I did a YouTube video. I'll see if I can link it in the description below about how to, if that happens for you, about how to get back to your novel if it's been, you know, sort of a long time. So I'll find that video and I'll link it below for you. But you know, that's what it was like, you know, and I think that's what it's like for a lot of people. A lot of us are raising children, a lot of us are still working full-time jobs, but it doesn't mean we can't still go after this dream that we have, you know, for pursuing a career as an author and getting our books out there. But my life looks a lot different now. My kids are grown, they're out of the house. Now I just have 3 dogs who are lying here on the floor with me, who, you know, need a lot of attention as well, but definitely not like children at all. But the thing that's different about my life, I don't work as a school psychologist anymore, but I travel a lot. And so I am usually on airplanes at least, you know, once a week, sometimes more. And I'm in and out of time zones. Sometimes I'm in and out of different countries. And that can definitely, it presents a different challenge. So I don't necessarily have that regimen that I had back in the day. And honestly, sometimes I miss that. You know, sometimes when your free time is constricted so much that you really only have, like I have an hour, I have 2 hours, you know, there's no negotiating with yourself about sitting down and getting busy writing. When you have a whole stretch of a day, sometimes it can get away from you, right? Like it's like, oh, I'll get to it. I will do that eventually. You know, I'll circle back, or I'll do, you know, a bunch of housework this morning and I'll write this afternoon. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen. And so I think I have found, as I have more just sort of personal freedom with regards to not having that very stressful career anymore, and I'm not raising young children anymore, I find I have to be much more strict with myself because my life is not that strict with me necessarily. So I find instead of, you know, having those structures in place, I kind of have to create them. And so, you know, one thing I do now is I wake up every day, and yeah, writing is always on my list of things to do or things I want to get done, along with, you know, 20 other things usually. But the way I handle kind of having that too much freedom and then squandering it oftentimes is I just have to really always be telling myself that, you know, if nothing else, the writing has to get done today. So it's a priority in a way that, you know, other things in my life used to be sort of my big, huge priority all the time. So, you know, of course, when my kids were little, my kids were my number one priority. And so it didn't matter if I woke up at 4 o'clock to try to get some writing done. If I wasn't quiet enough and one or both of my kids heard me and woke up, then they are now my priority and the writing kind of goes out the window. I don't have that problem anymore, but I find I still need to make writing a really big priority for me every single day. And there isn't anybody else that's going to to do that. Like you have to do that yourself. Like it has to be, you know, sort of your most important thing. Of course, depending on, you know, what sort of writer you want to be. If you want to be a career writer, probably yes, you're going to have to prioritize your writing just like it's a job. Which, you know, we're going to circle back to that because maybe that kind of takes some of the romance out of writing for you to think of it like a job. But if you don't do that, then it always just sort of is like this, you know, I will get to it, or it's maybe a hobby, or, you know, if it's the easiest thing to kind of sort of push off because in the moment, it doesn't necessarily seem as pressing or as important as that load of laundry or the kitchen that needs to be cleaned up or any of the other number of things. And so I think for me, it still works best, even though I'm not waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning usually anymore, unless I just happen to be awake. As much as possible, I am still trying to write first thing in the morning so that it's done. If I've at least gotten my sort of minimum word count goal first thing in the morning, I can still go about my day and take care of everything else that needs to be done. But I don't ever have to worry about coming back to getting the writing done, if that makes any sense. So let's talk for a second about this idea of like writing being a career and, you know, or writing being your job, because I think sometimes people, you know, they think of that and like, you know, maybe they have never had a job that they particularly enjoyed. And so, you know, writing is their creative time, their sort of play time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And to the best of your ability, I would say hang on to that feeling as much as possible. Like that feeling is going to carry you through and it's going to bring you back to the page again and again and again. When, you know, maybe sometimes you are not feeling as motivated as you should. So as much as possible, hang on to that sense of joy and creativity because that's really the magic, right? That's where the magic is. Having said that, I also don't think, particularly if you want to be a career writer, that waiting for that joyful spark of inspiration to strike before you sit down, before you're going to sit down and get any writing done, can really come around and kind of bite you in the butt because those sort of magical feelings don't necessarily happen randomly and all on their own all the time, right? At least maybe not consistently enough to, you know, get an entire book written. And, you know, oftentimes I find that, you know, if I just, even if I'm not feeling like it, if I just sit down, read over the last couple paragraphs, and I tell myself, look, all you have to do is write a sentence. Just write one sentence. Okay, 2 sentences. And it's like this little trick, you know, I sort of play with myself and it's like, you don't have to, look, it's okay if you don't get your minimum word count goal, which for me is 1,000 words a day, by the way. It's okay if you don't do that. But if you just sit down and get started, just approach your book, just get back into it. And what oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes happen is that flow just starts coming like this. I'll write a sentence and then I'm in, like, you know, for me, I sort of see my books in my head. They sort of play out for me like a movie. And so once I kind of get going with that, then I'm golden, right? You know, next thing you know, I've written 400 or 500 words and I'm like feeling really good. And once I've gotten 400 or 500 words, then I'm kind of like, well, I might as well just write the 1,000, right? So it's these like little games that you play with yourself, but they definitely work. So what does my writing routine look like, you know, these days? So, you know, a lot of times I'm in here in my office, you know, working at my computer, and that's lovely, right? When I'm home. But like I mentioned, I travel a lot these days. And so I am writing, you know, in airports. I am writing in hotel rooms. I am writing on beaches. I'm writing on balconies. I'm writing in restaurants. I am writing, you know, in a middle seat in economy, you know. So sometimes if I'm lucky, I'm writing in first class, but I'm not always that lucky. Wish we all could be that lucky all the time, right? But I think it's this idea of no matter where I go or what I'm doing, that writing, that book, that is my priority. That is my job. And so sometimes, you know, it's happening if I have a flight first thing in the morning and I'm able to write on it, then that's great. I can work on it. If it's not till I get to my hotel room, hopefully I have enough energy, depending on what my day has looked like, you know, I'm going to sit down and at least get a couple hundred words out, you know. And I think it's just always keeping that book at the forefront of your mind, and this desire to get back to your story as often as possible and as much as possible. And being aware of your energy, you know, because I'll tell you, like I am a morning person. I have more energy first thing in the morning. And so I know it's usually easier for me to show up and sustain attention and focus for longer if it's first thing in the morning. Now, maybe you're different. Maybe you're a night owl and you can go gangbusters all day long, you know, with that job and dealing with kids. And like once you hit the evening time, you're able to, okay, now let's get down and get to work. Whereas for me, that's it. Like usually by the night, I'm spent. I don't have anything left. And so that to me is when I'm, you know, watching my favorite, whatever I happen to be watching on Netflix or Apple TV, you know, at the time. So, but I think, you know, if you can know yourself and then just really try to think about what time it is that you have available or when you are at your best. And because writing is the priority, then that's when you're slotting that chunk of time in. You know, you're going to use your best time that you have available and is free for that piece kind of thing. And, you know, I always know, like when I worked full time and I had the kids, it was the sense that I had, if I was able to get up at 4 and get a chunk of writing done, no matter how many words it was, the whole sense I had for the whole rest of the day was just this like ease and accomplishment and just feeling really good that I had shown up for myself and for my story. And honestly, that is how, you know, after 2 decades of writing, I am about to finish my 11th novel. And just, I feel really proud of that, you know, looking back on those books with a sense of like accomplishment. And, you know, I did that because it matters to me and it was important. And even though I had a lot of priorities throughout my life, I managed to make writing one of the top 3 and now, you know, one of the number 1 priorities because I have the time and space to do that. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you're interested in reading any of my books, you can find them in the description below. There are links to the ones that are currently out. And then my new book, her name was Lola, should be coming out later this year. I don't have an exact publication date set yet because I'm not quite sure how long the edits for this novel are going to take me. And I don't want to make any false promises, but that is going to be coming hopefully before June. We'll see what happens, fingers crossed. If you enjoyed this, I hope that you will like it. Subscribe to my channel. I tend to make videos about writing, about planning the writing process, any and all of that. If you have any questions for me, go ahead and put them in the comments below. I love to hear from viewers. And if there's anything you would like me to make a video about in the future, drop that down there too, because I'm always looking for new content ideas that viewers are interested in watching. So I hope you have a wonderful day. And if you're a writer, happy writing. If you're a reader, happy reading. Have a wonderful day.